Okay, this is a reaction video. This is from Alternate History Hub. I've been watching Cody's videos for an awful long time, but I've never really reacted to one of them. This is What If Al Gore Won in 2000. Now, the reason I'm choosing this one is because I was in Florida during the time of 2000. I remember what was going on, and I want to give a little bit more perspective. I don't know what he's going to say about Al Gore, what would happen if Al Gore had won, but I am kind of curious about this one. Let's find out. What if Al Gore had won in 2000? It's from Alternate History Hub. Please click like, share, and subscribe for them as well as for me.
Mr. Vice President.
You won the 2000 election.
Well, this calls for a celebration.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of background real quick. I voted for George Bush in this election. Okay? I did not vote for Al Gore. I was not a fan of Bill Clinton as president, although I kind of softened on that stance. I mean, I'm not I don't regret not voting for Bill Clinton, but my feelings on Clinton have changed through the years.
Al Gore, the man, the myth, the Al Gore. For a relatively bland politician who was vice president for Bill Clinton 20 years ago, there's quite a few ways you may know of him. The climate change stuff, man, bear, pig.
I have ridden the mighty moonworm.
There is, however, one major thing we all remember about Al Gore. He lost an election, but it
Yeah, he lost an election. That was probably one of the most contentious elections that we've ever had in the United States.
wasn't just that he lost an election. John Kerry lost, and who remembers him? Al Gore lost the election of 2000 by the slimmest possible margins, in the craziest finale to an election season America has ever seen, up until, And this was before anybody at the time knew 2000 was going to be an incredibly defining era for.
And like I said, I was down in Florida in December of 2000 when after the election taken place, and let me put it this way: it was wall to wall coverage about counting the votes and making sure that every vote was counted and so forth. Now, Florida has done a reversal. Florida would never be in that position again. If we have an election in the United States in Florida right now, you know what's going to happen that night, because Florida has really changed how they do votes, how they count votes.
For a commander-in-chief. And this is a question I've gotten a lot. What if Al Gore had won? I think this question is less about Al Gore the man, and more knowing how the U.S. responded to 9/11 with George W. Bush.
Again, when it comes to George W. Bush and how he responded after 9/11, I can't. Whenever I look at it, when I think about it, you have to put yourself in that time frame. And in that time frame, I can't really fault his decisions when he made them. Now, what happened after he made them, that's where the problem comes in. But what would you have done in that in those circumstances? That's the question I have to ask myself. And I can only be true to myself. You can be true to yourself, but I got to be true to myself. And I really I can't recall myself having a problem with his decisions.
And it all began in 2000, when on election night, Florida became too close to call. So that's where we'll begin. In an alternate 2000, the results for Florida come in, and every news
No hanging chads, all electoral votes. Congratulations, Al Gore, you're now the President of the United States.
network calls it for Al Gore. In this scenario, Florida stays blue.
Al Gore 43. Here we go.
There is no too close to call. Instead, on election night, George W. Bush gives a concession speech and congratulates Al Gore as the next president of the United States.
The Gore-Lieberman administration begins.
But that's only a footnote compared to the real event.
Oh, yes. They've got the World Trade Center, yes.
We all know from 2001. The real defining moment of Bush's presidency that changed everything. No child left behind.
Yes, No Child Left Behind. That was a big tragedy. I didn't have to go through any of that stuff. I was 31 at the time, so I didn't have to worry about this. So yes, great tragedy of No Child Left Behind.
No Child Left Behind was one of Bush's first measures as president, a glimpse into what a peacetime Bush presidency probably would have looked like.
It would have been interesting to see what a peacetime, if 9/11 doesn't happen, how do we look at George W. Bush? Okay, he is defined by something that happened to him, or happened during his presidency on September 11th. And if memory serves, a lot of the reason people blame 9/11 is because of the election. Usually the election is over in November and we know what's going on, so everybody can prepare for the transition. This is Bill Clinton's second term is over. The Bush administration is going to come in, and it's just want to be a very easy transition. But this goes on, I think, until late December, I want to say, and it takes a long time for everything to get put into place, and everybody's behind even by the time 9/11 rolls around.
Mostly focused on tax cuts and attempts at education reform. And as a kid during this era, I can say No Child Left Behind was terrible. Essentially, it forced standardized testing into classrooms and schools, not for the sake of any kids' learning or grades, but to see which schools were in need of federal spending. Tests that a young Cody, and I'm guessing many others, thought were important in their educational future, when really it was just about the school getting money.
Again, I didn't have to go through any of this, so I don't know about the testing, but I do remember No Child Left Behind, and it really didn't work out well for George Bush.
So, yeah, Gore probably wouldn't have done that. I just wanted to complain about those stupid tests. Let's talk about 9/11.
Yeah, Gore would never have done something like that. Gore's too smart to do something like that. Yeah.
In the 2002 9/11 Commission report, it was written that one major reason why the 9/11 plot was not discovered by U.S. intelligence until it was too late was blamed on, of all things, the 2000 election. The report concluded...
Yeah, that's what I said. That's something I said earlier.
...that those months of chaos where no president was yet decided delayed an important time to build an administration. Time Bush or Gore needed to appoint national security figures instead of fighting a legal battle. And by the time that Bush won, it still took a few months for U.S. intelligence agencies to get back to full operation. Mm-hmm. The important information coming out of the Middle East that might have prevented these attacks were overlooked as the federal government was too disorganized to do anything. Even in 2002, the Commission said that had this delay not happened, then perhaps the attacks may not have happened at all. You could say, in some convoluted sense, Bush did 9/11. No, I'm kidding. Okay, obviously, this was one report, and there were a ton of other factors that went into 9/11 happening. I personally believe no matter who was president, the attacks were going to happen. And then
I agree. I think the attacks would have happened regardless whether Gore was president or Bush was president. I think Dennis Miller, I remember saying after 9/11, said even if you are the most, the biggest pacifist, even if you love everybody and have nothing against these people who did this, you are still their enemy and they still want to kill you.
In this alternate timeline, Al Gore is in the position of Commander-in-Chief to lead the U.S. in this new post-9/11 America. Republican or Democrat, everyone wanted to go get the guys who did this. Mm-hmm. This wasn't because of some military-industrial complex. There was no plan to just stay in Afghanistan forever. This was very simple. We were attacked, we attacked them back. So had Al Gore been president, we still would have invaded and occupied Afghanistan immediately after the attacks. The Taliban are overthrown, Bin Laden still sneaks into Pakistan, and he stays there. The U.S. is just stuck in the country. But does...
Yeah, the thing about alternate timelines is, and I'm not the first one who's ever said this, mind you, the farther you go away from the divergence, the the crazier it gets, or it's more difficult to predict what's going to happen. But I do agree with that. Look, after 9/11, look, I remember Republicans and Democrats getting together. Okay, you don't see that happen very often, where we need to behind the president, we need to yeah, exactly what he just said.
This change is Iraq. Iraq was squarely a thing that the Bush administration just wanted to do. Gore was an avid opponent against the war, mostly because it'd take valuable time and resources away from Afghanistan. So in an alternate timeline, the US doesn't invade Iraq. So even if 9/11 did happen and the US still went into Afghanistan, the war on terror would be a far smaller and less complicated conflict. The Iraq War also changed how the US would have left Afghanistan. Even in 2008, when Obama was running for president, his main promise was that we would get troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan.
And of course we didn't. We didn't get them out until Biden became president. And the way Biden did it was a giant, look, right now the Taliban's back in command. The way Biden did it was absolutely horrible. And it turned out to be pretty bad. In fact, you can actually make a correlation between the way Biden handled Afghanistan to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Granted, it's a stretch, but you can make an argument there. I don't like the way we left Afghanistan under Biden, and Biden was claimed that Trump said the same thing, that he was going to do the same thing, but Trump said he would do it if certain things were met, then he would leave Afghanistan, and those things were not met, and it turned out to be pretty bad for the Biden. But Biden also has the press backing him up, so it's not the end of the world. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate Biden. Okay, I generally tend to look at things from a perspective of what happened and what was the aftermath. I don't care who's president, even though I generally have a more conservative view of the world than I do a liberal.
And then Afghanistan just continued on for another 10 years. Why was that? Well, it was because of Iraq, and all that happened in 2011. The U.S. left Iraq in 2011, and immediately the entire nation devolved into civil war.
Again, that was another thing. That was Obama. How we left Iraq was not ideal. The ideal way of doing it.
The Iraq military fled and left military equipment for ISIS to then use, and so the plans for Afghanistan's withdrawal were delayed. Afghanistan needed more time in the cooker to make sure everything was right before the U.S. leaves. Glad it was worth it. In such an alternate timeline without Iraq or the withdrawal, the U.S. would have left Afghanistan 10 years ago, and we probably would have seen the same collapse happen too, but this time with the death of bin Laden being so recent in the minds of the world, it feel like the climactic end to the war.
I don't know about that, but okay.
America went in to get Al-Qaeda, and then it ended with bin Laden dead. Even if Afghanistan was not a stable nation, would then leave satisfied that they got their guys. But alright, in that sense, 9/11, no Iraq, the war is shorter, that's great. Assuming that the war on terror does not consume his presidency, this would be the main focus of his administration.
Yeah, well, Al Gore's a big climate change guy, and that's probably where he would go, is working on is the environment.
The climate issue, resulting in new legislation to invest in green energy and tax incentives for companies that cut down on greenhouse gases. Had he won re-election in 2004, which he probably would, then Gore would use Katrina as another example of climate change. Yep.
The other thing that you have to keep in mind, now you got George Bush here with the mission accomplished thing on the screen, is that in the United States, it's probably the same around the world, and this is not me complaining, don't get me wrong, is if you are a Democrat, okay, you're going to have the press backing you up, no matter what you do. And if you're a Republican, it's not so much, okay? So whatever Al Gore did, no matter whether you liked it or not, it would have smelled of roses. If Al Gore does the exact same thing, if he invades Iraq, if he does everything that George W. Bush does, the press is going to back him up. They're going to say he's doing a hell of a job. Way to go. They probably will. Hey, you said Democrats don't have the gumption to do things like that. Yes, here's proof. Okay, but again, this is not. It would be interesting. It would have been interesting to see how that it would have panned out. What he would have done. Now he says probably he wouldn't have invaded Iraq, and that's probably true. But you don't know. Okay, like I said, the farther you get from the divergence, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yet other than that, without the Iraq War, the U.S. would be relatively peaceful. In fact, even the terrorism paranoia at the time might be calmer too. Gore was against the Patriot Act, and so either that act doesn't pass, or it's significantly weaker than in our own timeline. There's still one major event in the 2000s that we all know wouldn't change: the recession. It's argued over how much Bush contributed to the recession, but I don't think he was a decisive factor.
Neither do I. That was you could go back to Bill Clinton's presidency to look at why the recession took place, but I agree.
By how the banks and housing market were operating at the time, this was a house of cards always going to fall. Mm-hmm. It could even be in the same time frame of 2008. So really, that's the next guy's problem. And with Gore being president for 8 years and leaving office in 2009, well, who's going to be his replacement? Predicting presidential results, as we know, is a difficult business. And I'm not going to say that the predictions I have going forward.
The other thing about that, and you also have to keep in mind a couple things, is you just had 12 years of Reagan and Bush before you got Bill Clinton, okay? And Bill Clinton's first 2 years were not very good. That's why in 1994 you had the contract with America. And the thing that Clinton did that was smart on his part is he basically went along with the country. He basically understood that he wasn't going to get any of what he wanted passed, but he basically went along with the Republicans for the most part, not completely, but it was actually a good time in the country because you actually had, like I said about Bill Clinton as a president, but as a politician, there's nobody better. Okay, George W. Bush wasn't a very good politician. Okay, and if you look at what happens, if you take the 12 years prior to that with Reagan and Bush, and then you move it to the front with Clinton, and then Gore in 2004, and also the way that people felt at the time about the terrorists, I'm not sure he wins re-election. Okay, he's against the Patriot Act. He doesn't want to invade Iraq. The way people felt at that point in time, I'm not sure he wins that election in 2004. I don't know who takes his place, but I'm not sure if he wins that election. That's an interesting thing to look at.
Forward would be correct. The entire political world of the United States is fundamentally different in this alternate 2009 than in our own. There are some factors that make it easier to determine who's going to be the next president. So, to wrap this up, I would imagine that Gore would win in 2000, it'd go McCain in 2008, Obama in 2012, he would serve 2 terms until 2020, and then a Republican that none of us would know about would win in an alternate 2021.
Again, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, if John McCain, let's just say John McCain wins the election in 2008, I'm not sure he doesn't serve 2 terms. Okay, I'm not sure Obama takes over as president. Okay, it's probably look. I have my own opinions on Obama. I have my opinions on Trump. I have my opinions on Biden as well. But I'm not. Where it comes to me, I'm not sure Gore wins in 2004.
Perhaps there'd be different people, but you and I both know that faces on the political landscape don't really change that much.
Mm-hmm. It says originally I was going to have a long explanation about why I picked these candidates, but it went on too long and was boring. Okay, thanks. Fair enough. For all I know, people are thinking this is boring too.
Now, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound different at all. I want my money back. And that is true. On the map, in the grand scale, it doesn't seem like that much of a dramatic change. Just like the War on Terror itself, the real change was in a societal mentality, the excuse of bringing in the Patriot Act or creating a culture of surveillance. That was the real change that the war brought. Invading Iraq and not finding any WMDs was a massive slap in the face to American prestige. And the fallout from that failure only extended a war that should have been over far sooner, not only destroying any sympathies for the U.S. following.
Again, he's talking about things that nobody would have known until they actually happen, and I get that. Okay, look. I remember listening to them talk. Who was it? God, I forget his name. Colin Powell. Talk about the weapons of mass destruction, and look, anybody who listened to that was probably convinced. I was convinced. Okay, but they didn't find them. Okay, but how are they going to know if they don't search? But should they be searching? Should they even be doing it in the first place? Okay, there's so many questions you can ask, but it was done. They didn't find them, and that was it. End of story. But yeah, quite interesting to look at it from a different perspective.
9/11, but allowing other nations to move in as the good ones. It was a very real possibility that America could just invade a nation without much reason, and it's an event that will continue to haunt the United States. In the political terms, Bush ironically killed neoconservatism as a mainstream ideology, as nobody, not even the Republicans of today, want to be associated with Bush or his administration. Had Gore won, it's pretty likely the GOP remains the party of Reagan instead of, well, you know, the...
Look, you can think what you want about Donald Trump as a president, okay? A lot of what he said and a lot of how he acts is, look, everybody, he's a very divisive person, okay? And I will freely admit that I did vote for him, okay? But Donald Trump, I think, governed the country fairly well. I can't really have a lot of what he said and some of the things that he did, I do have some questions with, but I really can't fault the guy for doing the best that he could. He won the election. He wanted the job, and he's running again. But he stands out there. Donald Trump. When the press wanted to answer questions answered, he stood out there and talked to them. Okay, unlike Biden, who runs, and lives in the basement and does what he wants. Two different presidents, two different philosophies, two different ideologies. The only thing I really have a big problem with when we talk about Donald Trump is I think for a conservative, for a businessman, he should have been smarter about his willingness to spend money. He spent us into oblivion, not too dissimilar from Obama. And not too dissimilar from Biden as well.
The U.S. would see a calmer political landscape, less of a drive on both sides of the aisle towards populism, a trajectory we're in the middle of today.
Well, I don't know if I agree with him there. I think that would have happened anyway. I think, I was talking with a friend of mine about what really, if there's a big change that I believe in the history of the world, so to speak, I go back to the fall of the Soviet Union. You look at what the political landscape was like prior to that and to what has happened post that. Okay, prior to that, in 1980s, I knew who my enemy was. It was the commies, it was the Russians, it was the Soviet Union. After that, we now have people in Congress who actually believe that if we were to follow the government, the principles of the government of the Soviet Union, the same thing, we can actually make it work. And we were also much more tolerant of each other politically. I mean, if I said I was a Republican and you said you were a Democrat in the 80s, we just agreed to disagree and had a good conversation. If I come out and say I'm a Republican or I'm a hardcore Republican all the way, then I'm going to get chastised by the left. And they're going to treat me like a pariah. It's just like I said, the farther you get away from the diversions, to sit there and say it's more calmer. I'm not so sure I agree with that.
On that,
Just like I don't agree. I'm not sure Al Gore wins the election in 2004. I'm not sure Al Gore doesn't invade Iraq. Okay, because you have to remember what the time was like. You know, if he doesn't invade Iraq, you might get a Republican in there who beats him in 2004, then goes invades Iraq, and maybe you have Gore Bush too, and you get it just a little bit later.
if this video was made 20 years in the future, we'd have a clearer understanding of what damage the Iraq War truly did to the image of the US. So while on the map and in the big picture, not much seems to have changed, the day-to-day, the culture of politics we are smacked with every single moment, simply doesn't exist. Instead, we'd already be 10 years on from the war in Afghanistan. 9/11, while still mourned today, wouldn't nearly be as close in the American mindset. We would have moved on. As 9/11 hasn't remained relevant because it was a big deadly attack, or because we never forget, it's remained in the American mindset because those attacks for 20 years were still affecting our lives. From September 11th up into the fall of Kabul, the War on Terror directly shaped U.S. foreign policy, and it wouldn't have remained so ingrained if Iraq was simply not invaded. That calm is often difficult to express in videos like this.
But I do agree with him when he does say that things would have been different if we hadn't invaded Iraq. Okay, I do agree on that front. Look, at the time, there were a lot of people who thought it was a good idea. Okay? At the time, a lot of the Americans supported it. And a lot of the American politicians who did support it, some of them ended up paying for it. Okay? But, it is what it is. It happened. And we're living in post invasion of Iraq to this day. We're still dealing with the ramifications from it, as he says.
Because you can't describe a political era that is stable. It just is. So when asking the question, what if Al Gore won, it isn't because Al Gore would have been just that good of a president. It's asking what the United States would be like if Bush wasn't in office to decide to invade Iraq.
A lot of this also comes down, I mean, if you look at John F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, if you look at his politics now, what they were back then, and you were to take his political views and move them up to 2023, he comes across like a moderate Republican. Now, he wouldn't identify like that. He'd still be a Democrat. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that John F. Kennedy was a Democrat or was a Republican by any stretch. But a lot of what he believes, or some of the things that he stood for, make him sound like a more moderate Republican. And like I said, he's had in his version, Al Gore wins both 2000 and 2004, and his alternate timeline. Again, you have to remember the context of what you're talking about. What was going on in 2004 and around that time frame.
And that will be an ever-changing answer, as we're still dealing with the ramifications from just a few votes in Florida in the 2000 election. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.
Okay, this was what if Al Gore won in 2000. I don't think Al Gore would have been a poor president. I don't think George W. Bush was a poor president. But I don't think he was the greatest president. But I think that look, again, this is why I don't discuss politics. Because if I start talking politics, there's probably a number of people who are out there who think I just stuck my foot in my mouth and think I'm just two steps to the left of Hitler. In fact, a lot of people still compare politicians to Hitler who don't even know who the hell Hitler was. Okay, but look, this was interesting. What if Al Gore won in 2000? Again, the more you leave the divergence, the more you question what's going to happen. I don't know that Gore wins in 2004. I don't know that he doesn't invade Iraq. I don't know what happened, but it would have been interesting. I just remember being down there in Florida in 2000 during that time frame, and I remember they were all over. If you were a Republican, okay, I think the election, the person who was in charge of the election down in Florida was a Republican. The press was ripping her a new one. I forget her name. They were ripping her a new one. And when the Supreme Court basically ultimately said, look, Bush won, okay, this is what happens. Once the election certified, the press went bananas. That the the Supreme Court decided for America that Gore was the right president, and I remember Republicans going to the vice president's house or posting outside where Al Gore was living, because he was still the vice president until January the 20th, and the people were going, get out of Cheney's house and things like that. So I mean, it was on both sides. But anyway, this was good. Alternate History Hub. I love listening to Cody. Some of the things that he comes up with is pretty good. So please click like, share, and subscribe for him. And please click like, share, and subscribe for me. And if you don't like what I said, I'm sorry. Okay, I can go with what I think. That's why I don't do politics a whole lot. But if you want me to do more politics, let me know. But thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching.